We're going to dig into the case against Bryan Kohberger. Lots of controversy going on right now, and what some would say controversial tools being used in this investigation: investigative genetic genealogy, or IgG. And before you think, oh, this is junk science, this is scary, this is something new, it's really not. It kind of depends on if you're the prosecution or the defense and how it's going to weigh your way or not, if you're going to call it junk science. IgG has been around for a while. In the case of Bryan Kohberger, IgG playing a key role in connecting him to the crime scene. But with the defense now challenging its use, it raises questions about how investigators utilize such cutting-edge methods. Beyond the courtroom, IgG isn't just about DNA, it's about behavior, patterns, and the way suspects may unknowingly leave a trail. Joining us to discuss is retired FBI special agent and former chief of the Counterintelligence Behavioral Analysis Program, Robin Dreeke. Robin, from your perspective, how does a tool like IgG change the behavior of a suspect when they're accused of it? And what kind of patterns do investigators look for once an initial DNA match points them in a direction like this with something like IgG?
It's so funny. Like you said, the patterns of behavior are what I'm always looking for first, and then so it's either going to get clues from the DNA that's going to clue you in to look for patterns of behavior, or it's going to be the pattern of behavior is going to clue you in to look for DNA, and hopefully the two come together because the two together make a really, really solid case. From what I understand in this case, I was listening to Robert, was it Robert Bloom who wrote the book
The
about this
book.
case?
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was on Megyn Kelly's show, and he was talking about what the defense is really trying to do here with the collection of the DNA. It's a sequence of what databases they accessed and when that they're really going to be able to challenge here, which kind of really throws up this is going to be maybe on the DNA side a little bit more challenging, but from what I understand, prosecution has plenty without it. So we will see. But yeah, it does change patterns of behavior. If you're trying to, especially if you're trying to mask yourself in your DNA. So we'll see. It's interesting.
It's something where they're questioning it, but they're more so seemingly questioning the methods as to which it was gotten. It's not so much the result of it being incorrect.
Right.
It's more so, did you do this correctly, ethically, whatever they want to throw out
Yep.
there? Because at the end of the day, it leads to Kohberger. They just don't want a jury to know that it leads to Kohberger. That's the most simplistic way I can put it, where
Yep.
they got the IgG data from the father. They went back, compared it down to who they suspected and where it might be in Moscow. They eventually arrest Kohberger. They do a swab on Kohberger and then compare that to the initial IgG and discover, oh, yes, this pretty much has to be our guy. Because it's all there. It doesn't, there's no possible way in this equation that it's somebody else's DNA. It's not an option. It's not like, well, it's 1 in 4. It's like 1 in some billion is what the
Yes.
number truly is. So it's 100% Kohberger's. The question will then be, well, how did it get on this knife sheath that then matches Kohberger and his IgG and then his actual DNA when they discovered that. If the IgG stays in this case, which I'm thinking it probably will,
Hmm.
what kind of a defense does Kohberger have? Because this is, I mean, they're throwing things at the wall. You know, he likes going for drives at night and looking at the stars. Didn't seem to have that much excitement to it. Nobody really jumped onto that going, oh, of course, that explains it. He didn't kill anybody. But this pretty much shows that he was at least there, or his DNA was on the knife sheath at some point in time. If this does not get thrown out and it all goes into court, does he have an argument if this knife sheath is there?
I don't think so. If the knife sheath is there and they got the DNA and it's admissible, I think he's done. Because now look at the behavior pattern. Without this, we got a lot of reasonable doubt to me. Because without this, and we were just talking about this, most most murders, there's a connection somewhere between the victim and the murderer. And they still, again, well, everything's still under seal, so we don't know, but we still haven't seen any actual linkage between Kohberger and any of the girls, or any, or may I think there might have been like one potential data point there where there was, but that's why defense is really hinging on putting everything to try to throw out the IgG, as you're saying, the DNA, because the DNA makes it really, really solid. It's 100%. It's his on that nice sheet, but again, how it got there, well, it's a touch DNA on that thumb snap. So, but again, it's the data. I know the only thing they're challenging is the database that the feds used to access it when they had permission to do it. Like, what came first, the chicken and the egg on this? I think is
Hmm.
what defense is going after, if I understand it right.
And at the end of the day, does it really matter? I mean, I guess to procedure it might, but there doesn't even seem to be really any answers to this is improper use of it and this is proper use of it. There doesn't seem to be really any rules around other than somebody saying, "Well, that doesn't seem fair." Great. To you it doesn't, to the victims, and it led to supposedly the killer here. It means a lot.
Yeah, so the collection of it from the knife sheath follows regular procedure. I think the way they got it, boy, I'm trying to remember as I'm listening to it on the other show. I think the way they were able to get it from both a cheek swab, which actually came after he's arrested, but actually what led to his arrest, it was how did, so I know the big question is, how did law enforcement know, the locals know, to go after Kohberger if they hadn't accessed and put that DNA into a database that so that's what it was. They collected the DNA, the touch point DNA off the night sheath, but the dad's DNA was not in a database that was normally accessible to the FBI at that time. And so, how did they make the leap from one system to the other to find out to go after him and target? I think that's what the defense is going after. Like you said,
Hmm.
from what I understand, is not being the lawyer side, but from what
Yeah.
I understand and what I'm seeing, it's not going to make a tinker dam's difference.
Yeah.
But I think that's why defense is going at it hard.
Are they going at it hard because they think they truly have a legal argument, or is this more so another, let's throw this into the ether of the public? We don't have a jury yet. Let's throw everything we can possibly put out there and get it into somebody's mind, because all you need is one,
Yeah.
that this is not a reliable source in any way, shape, or form that they can, whether saying it's junk science, whether it was captured illegally or wrongly or unethically or whatever they're going to try and say. Get that out there. It doesn't have to be a legal argument right now. Just get it in people's minds that this is not a reliable source of evidence. Is that what you think they're kind of doing here, more so than they really think this will get thrown out?
I think that's the hope and the prayer that people are going to think that, even though that's really implausible if you dive even just like 1 inch below the surface on
Hmm.
understanding how reliable this data point is. So I think that's plan B, is to sow some seeds of doubt. Plan A is to really try to get it out to use it to get it the hell out, so defense doesn't have to worry about it, because without it they can sow those seeds of doubt, so you don't have a beyond reasonable doubt jury when it comes to going for either life in prison or firing squad, as they're saying is now in place in
Yeah.
Idaho.
Uh, does it surprise you at all that we have all of this technology now that really, I mean, it narrows things down to such a fine point where we can really, without a doubt, in many cases, identify the perpetrator of crimes in ways that we couldn't do years ago. Yet, we have more doubt being cast on these methods uh, than ever thought possible. Of course, your defense, if somebody's going to, if they're not using it for their advantage, they're going to say this is not accurate, this is not real. But at some point, how are we doing this? There is fact and there is not fact. Some things like this, like science, where the DNA is there, that seems to be a thing. Cell phone data, that's another one that they're going to try and argue that Kohberger's cell phone data is different than what it was interpreted by the FBI and the investigators in this case. The data that shows, the Cellbrite data that shows him near the house, the phone going off. There's a lot that points to him being around the means of that house for a lot of time before the murders even occurred, and
Mhm.
including on that night. But the fact that we can go in and an attorney can argue that Well, my expert over here says this phone data doesn't say this, and this one over here says that. That's got to be insanely confusing for a jury when they're not experts in this. They're relying on an expert. How can you have two different experts saying two completely different things about data that is pretty much there and set in stone and doesn't lie?
That's a great question, but that's why that's why they're not presenting all this evidence to a scientist,
Yeah.
a cognitive, unbiased scientist. You're presenting it to a jury. And so it's up to the both the defense attorney and the prosecution to understand who the jury is, and they're going, one side's going to try to confuse them and sow seeds of doubt by mumbo jumbo, and the other side's going to try to make it more solid and simplistic. So it comes down to how well their experts can communicate and make the complex simple for whatever the jury's composed of, but maybe it's not a jury that's composed of people that need it, simple. So it really comes down to every trial comes down to the jury. What do they need to see? How do they need to see it? How do they need to be presented? Just the courtroom presentation. This is what, Kohberger's defense attorney is doing really well anyway, always placing them in a suit, keeping them well groomed, all these things. I mean, I have my friends from the FBI. They do great, huge classes on ways and the types of jackets even that lawyers should wear in a courtroom in order to weigh the jury to their side. The number of buttons they should have, the colors of shirts they should wear. I mean, there is a huge science behind how to appeal to a jury or anyone or even a judge in this matter. So there's a lot behind these things, and so it really depends.
Kohberger's education in criminology, being a teacher, he got fired obviously right before the crimes were committed, but he was a PhD criminology student. He knew a lot about the field. Obviously, it's not like being in the field and actually living it, but he had a good knowledge well beyond the average Joe. Do you think that's going to play a role in any of this for the defense or the prosecution, that they can use that to their advantage, proving or trying to disprove his involvement in a case like this?
I would think the prosecution might try to use it just to show the steps he took to use his knowledge, to lose his backgrounds, to gain the types of knowledge he had in order to carry out the crimes the way he did. But again, kind of like from the very early that my get-go of the entire thing, when looking at him and watching him and seeing the way these things are committed, it looked literally like a student that had studied this without the experience of having done it once. Because it was executed and no, I'll say it was planned very, very well, whether it was him or someone else. It was executed poorly. There was missteps, and luckily those missteps were in a huge area, and being number one, the knife sheath. I mean, that was the biggest one there. Throwing, and between that and boxing up your trash and throwing it in the neighbor's trash at the same during the same time period that you might be a suspect in this. That was also a huge, hey, I know I shouldn't throw it in my trash, but having never seen cops and how they conduct trash covers, you have no idea on actually how they're conducted. You just know they're conducted, so let's put it in the neighbor's trash.
That's why he was using rubber gloves. Like, I just use rubber gloves. I'll never be caught. Yeah.
Except when you bought the knife that you used in the killing and the first time, and when you didn't buy it from wherever you bought it from, when you didn't walk into the Walmart or when you got it on Amazon, it shows up to your house, you should have unwrapped it with gloves on.
Yeah, that was a second thought, though. But after the fact, wear the gloves, bleach the car, no one will know the difference. I'm most fascinated about what we don't know in this case yet, of evidence that they have that they will present because it's been sealed. I'm going to guess there's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, and just think about this too. I mean, so getting rid of the clothes he was wearing, he or whoever did it, as well as the murder weapon, that was part of the plan because he knew that that's what you have to do. But you forgot the knife sheath where you committed the murder. That was big bad boo boo. But also, from what we understand and the conjecture is, he wasn't there to kill all four.
Yeah.
And so when faced with reality, in other words, he had a standard operating procedure of what he was trying to attempt to do. But when the first round goes down range, like they say in combat, chaos breaks out and your plan goes to hell.
Yeah.
And so he didn't have plan B ready, and plan B went to hell. And so I think his brain went to lockdown. It's why Even the author said that had what's the one girl survivor's name? I
I don't have it
apologize.
in front of me, but yeah.
Yeah, she survived because she didn't speak, is his
Hmm.
conjecture, because she didn't make herself part of his, even though he had like tunnel vision. Whoever it was, whether it's him or someone else, had tunnel vision moving out of that place because chaos happened and he was reacting to the environment around him, and new stimulus coming in.
Yeah.
She didn't make herself a new stimulus, hence she survived, thankfully. Um, that's what happened. He had tunnel vision and he was going for one, and he was confronted with many, and it caused him, I think, to make some missteps on the scene itself, which led us to to hopefully having a conviction here at some point because of the DNA.
It makes me wonder what was that moment like when he realized, oh shit, I left the sheath there. And I'm wondering if in his mind he thought, I'll just go back and get it, because there
Hmm.
are allegedly sightings of him, like driving by. It was more in the morning when the investigation was beginning, and once people had kind of woken up and realized there was bodies in the house, because remember that was a long stretch of time before police ever arrived, which was kind of odd to begin with. But he supposedly was driving around there. I'm wondering if he thought he was going to be able to get back in and go grab that sheath and get out. Or is it just common that a person of this nature, if in fact it is him, to go visit the scene of the crime once the circus begins as people start discovering the carnage?
More common to go back to the scene and see the circus, see the carnage, kind of judge, engage, what their reactions. In other words, he's seen
Hmm.
if it looks like they're running out of there and they know exactly what they're doing, or they kind of taking their time because they don't have anyone that they're looking for. The my so placing myself the best we can, doing that deep context from his perspective. So here he is, he's got plan A, he's got plan B, very well thought out, very methodical about what he did. He tried to mitigate all his things by what he covered himself with, the gloves he was wearing. So worst case scenario, he now leaves the scene. He's like, oh my God, I left a knife sheath behind. But because his arrogance and his confidence in his pre-planning, he's probably saying, but it's okay. I was wearing gloves. I did all these things, and so rather than risk going back in and get it, I'll just rest assured that I did things the right way. Never thinking in a million years they're going to get touch DNA off that thumb snap.
Kind of a dumb thing to assume. that
Well, what are you going to do at that point, right?
Yeah, exactly. What are you? Yeah, exactly. Just hope to God that it's not there. And I mean, really, I mean, it could have been, had he been smarter with that, there might have been no DNA on it, and then he would have never, that would have stopped the investigation. Would have never really gotten it off the ground to go in his direction
And
initially.
who knows
Yeah,
what sort of DNA collection he had studied up to that point. I had
true.
never heard of touch DNA until I think it was, I'm not sure if it was this case or the Rachel Morin case. There was one case in the last 2 years when the first time I heard of touch DNA.
Hmm.
And so that's even because it's even more advanced. It's
Yeah,
literally basically from a thumbprint.
yeah.
It's literally just touch. You can get enough off of that, and so he might have gotten to the point where in his studies that it's got to be a hair, it's got to be something under the nails, and that's why he's wearing full coveralls, whoever it was, So I think he thought he might have mitigated all that he knew about. He might not have known about that. That's a possibility as well.
Hey, thanks for checking out the video. Be sure to follow us wherever you download podcasts, and especially Apple Podcasts, where you can get advanced episode and premium content on our premium channel right there. Also, be sure to follow us on social media so you don't miss any breaking updates on the stories that matter to you most. We're on TikTok, X, Instagram, Facebook. Just search Hidden Killers Podcast with Tony Bruschi, and you'll find us right there. Again, thanks for watching.